who wants to go first on telling their story and introducing themselves?
I'll go.
Asking one of us to make a decision is like exactly why we're here to talk about neurodivergence.
Not the awkward silence.
Not me.
Hello, makers. Welcome to Making Conversation, a podcast where we celebrate all things making. My name is Jen. My pronouns are she, her, and today's episode is another one of the panels that we did at Flock Fiber Festival way back in the year of 2024. Seems so long ago, doesn't it? Neurodivergence and craft. And we are talking all about navigating life, business, and how crafting really does help and is one of those wonderful tools in our neurodivergent toolbox. Now, I do want to point out this panel is just ADHD folks because that's who volunteered, but I know that there are so many different neurodivergent experiences in the crafting world, and we see you. Joining me today are two incredible fiber artists who have turned some of their passions into thriving businesses, while also figuring out how to work with, not against, their brains. First up, we have Marcela of Little Wing Fibers, a phenomenal dyer and creator who brings downright magical vibes to their work. She creates colorways that are inspired by stories that help reconnect you with your inner child and focuses on the softest fibers that are always sensory friendly and next to skin comfortable. Then we have Amanda, formerly of Geektastic Fibers, now running Fandom's Fibers. Amanda is a super creative person who blends pop culture and fiber arts in a very perfect way. Amanda's work is playful, vibrant, and full of personality. Throughout this conversation, we get real about what it's like to be diagnosed with ADHD later in life, how we manage our executive dysfunction, or at least try to, and some of the creative things that we do to help manage our ADHD. Those lovely tools that we've put in our neurodivergent toolbox. If you have something that really helps you with your neurodivergence, comment it below because, sometimes I just hear people talking about things that helps them and it clicks with something. So I have a feeling we're going to have a few people that might be able to learn things from others in these comments. So please throw it down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to Making Conversation and like this episode. Comment if there's anything that pops up that might be helpful to somebody else, or if anything resonates with you during this episode. Share with somebody that you think would enjoy this. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can buy me a coffee via the link below. All right, let's get into it.
Hi, I'm Marcela, the dyer behind Little Wing Fibers, and I was diagnosed with ADHD about 3 years ago. So like in my very late 20s. It's been a journey to like look back and notice where it always was, and just like finding new ways to cope with it.
I'm Amanda, and I'm easily distracted. No, I was diagnosed with ADHD about 5-ish years ago, so early 30s. And it was almost a grieving process for me. Like, I was like, so many wasted years when I could have been, learning how to cope. But yeah, that was about 5 years ago. And now it's just a process to learn how to make it work for me instead of against me.
Hi, I'm Jen. As you know, if you've seen this podcast before, I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 40. Basically, my ex one day was like, I think you have ADHD. And I was like, what? Like, that concept had never even been talked about about me. Like, no doctor had said anything, no therapist or anything like that. I was just like, what? Like, how have you never said this to me before? And he was like, oh, I've told you like 4 times. So that checked out. I then went to TikTok and looked at like all of the TikToks about people's experiences with ADHD, specifically women, or people born with a uterus. And so many things made sense that it was like, how have I never known this for the 40 years of my life? And so I was thankfully very easily able to get diagnosed. And ever since then, I'm still learning stuff that it's like, oh, that's connected to my ADHD. Interesting.
Mhm.
And Amanda, I know that you said that for you it was like a grieving process, and for me it felt more like a celebration because everything made sense. You
Mm.
know, it was like everything clicked and everything was like just like fell into place. And I don't know that I've ever felt grief, and not that that's obviously that's not wrong.
Mhm.
Everybody has different ways of coping through it, but um I definitely understand myself a lot better now.
Mhm.
And I think through that, through finding out everything, like my therapy sessions are so much more like we get so much more done, I feel like, because now I fully understand how my brain works, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was just gonna add in that like for me it was like a lot of really mixed emotions. It was a lot of delayed like emotional experiences. Like I like felt a lot of frustration at like my younger self, but also like at people around me being like, how did you not see this?
Mhm.
Because it was very
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah.
And like things that could have been like easier for me in school and like especially like because I really liked the structure of school with my ADHD. Like that just it masked it so well. But then like the
Mhm.
minute I graduated college, I like couldn't find a job. I couldn't like self-start to like look for jobs, and like I was just floundering, and I literally went back to art school because I was like, I need this.
See, for me, it was the lack of structure that's in college that ruined me.
Yeah, I just burned myself out because I am the ADHD that I am like overachiever times 10
Mm.
to, probably mask certain things.
Yes.
Definitely to mask certain things, let's be real. Um, so like in high school, I was in like 9 clubs, and
Yep.
in my junior year, because I was not only was I trying to get a scholarship, but just that's how I was. And I was constantly, I was a very good student as well. So it was like my
Yep.
grades were top. I was in 9 clubs. I did theater, choir, and then all of those other things. And then when I got to college, I was so burnt out that I literally like failed the first semester and went home and never
Mm.
returned. Because I'm good at learning as I'm doing, right?
Yes,
And so
me
like
too.
that's how all of my marketing skills came, was from people saying, "Hey, you're good at this thing, do all of these other things too." So, this is a podcast about the act of making. Let's talk about how crafting has played a role in helping, combat, or however we want to say that, because that sounds negative. It's not necessarily negative. It's a great thing to have crafting as
It's
a
a
tool in our
tool.
toolbox, in our neurodivergent toolbox. How do you each use crafting to help with some symptoms that pop up?
It's almost like obviously, it's like a stem. You use knitting, crocheting, cross stitching, little projects that you carry with you everywhere. I mean, you know, fiber artist doesn't always have one with them. I know people who keep them in their car, like a specific one in their car for when they're, stuck in traffic or in the pickup line. Anytime your hands are not moving, they've got to have something to do. Otherwise, it's just too loud in your brain. And I know for me, I can't even watch TV without having something in my hands, or, there's got to always be something. I got to always be moving. That's something that, helps me cope, not just with everyday life, but the act of downing, especially self-striping, is a very physical, you know, job. And it kind of helps. At the end of the day, I'm tired, but physically exhausted enough to go to sleep, which is a chore in and of itself, falling
Mhm.
asleep.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm like mentally pleased with what I did that day, as opposed to being like, I had nothing done today. I didn't do anything. And I'm somehow, you know, still in bed and I've done nothing. So that whole process is pleasing for me. all the way around.
Mm-hmm. I have a question about the self-striping. What does that look like when you are dyeing, and how does that kind of help with ADHD brain stuff?
So curious about this too.
Lack of a better way of saying it.
It's a lot of repetition. So I use a warping mill. Some people use a warping board. That warping mill, like once you've got it set, it just spins. Like you're just spinning the wheel and making sure that, nothing gets out of place, set where your stripes go, pull it off, and then start over again, and then same when after you're done dyeing all the stripes, you put it back on the mill and you make it back into, skeins. And that's a lot of repetition and spinning. You have to think about what you're doing, but it's still a little bit thoughtless. So you can let your mind wander, or you can, kind of put a podcast on in the background or some sort of audiobook, but still have other parts of your brain working as well.
Either of you, do you find that putting on a podcast or even like a TV show that you've seen a million times when you're trying to get stuff done, do you feel like that helps you move forward? Yeah.
We didn't have a TV in our bedroom for the longest time, and we put one in last year, and magically the laundry gets folded now because we can turn that on, and it's just, and the bed's made. Wow.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I always have something playing. I can't do quiet. I can't do silent.
Mm-hmm. Even when I'm just like doing something on my phone, I have to have something picture in picture playing.
I can't be just like existing without like something in the background. And I've been
Are
that
you
way
watching
since...
something now, Amanda?
Yeah, I'm watching myself in the corner.
Yeah, no, this is stimulating. This is like nice. I'm also like very social. So like having another person in the room immediately pulls my focus, and that like really helps, that like extrovert part. I was gonna say that I've been like that since I was a kid. I was that like kid that had like an earbud in connected to my like iPod, CD player, like whatever, just constantly. It didn't matter where I was. I just had an earbud. I needed background music.
And I had playlists for every occasion.
I still do.
I know. I really want to get into that at some point, Marcela, about your playlist, because that was something that when we had our in-person chat about this at Flock, a lot of people were really interested in that. For so long, I was like, knitting is how I can relax, because I'm not someone who's like, I'm going to go sit and relax and watch television, because my brain just goes through the to-do list that I have, and like sitting and relaxing just feels too much for me, which is sad. And I have worked through some of that. But I was always like, oh, knitting is something that just helps me relax, because I can sit and watch TV and knit and I'm still doing something. And that was what I said before I learned that I had ADHD. So that was another thing that like super made sense when I was diagnosed. I was like, oh, okay, so this is why you can't meditate, but knitting kind of gives you that same feeling that everybody talks about when they meditate. Cool. That's So I feel like it's, my way of giving myself rest while also still creating.
My therapist told me to not try and meditate, just to practice mindfulness. And I was like, I think I could probably do that. I definitely can't meditate.
I've never been able to meditate. It's like, I had to take a class one time in high school where we did it like at the beginning. And like, I was just like, I couldn't sit there and just like the room was dark and quiet. And so either I would fall asleep or like I would just like be fidgety and restless. And
I'd wig out.
Like, the teacher would be like, you need to calm down and like meditate, like just be mindful. And I'm like,
you're like, no, I can't do this.
I can't do that.
Every episode, we need to know everybody's maker story. So, Marcela, where did everything begin?
I've always been an artsy kid. Like I was an art major in college. I always wanted to be like an artist where I grew up. So like creativity was always like part of that. But my late grandma and my aunt and a bunch of people in my family like do fiber arts, textile arts. Like that's just kind of always been like a thing there. And so it was kind of only a matter of time before I eventually learned to knit. And I actually just got one of those like Facebook memories that 14 years ago today was when I like felt the hyperfix like click in for knitting. And I think the Facebook status was like knit, 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 knit. Like, I just
That's
was like,
cute.
so
I love
into
it.
My aunt taught me how to knit, and she's been my like number one enabler. Shout out to Sylvia. She is an avid knitter. And she was the one who like took me to my first yarn shop, bought me my first sock yarn, like not Joanne's yarn, like good woolly yarn. And so that I went down that rabbit hole, which sorry mom, like that got expensive quick. But yeah, so I've just been kind of knitting ever since. In high school, 14 years ago was high school, I was knitting in class. I one time started knitting with like toothpicks and embroidery floss, and I made little keychains for all my friends. And I was obsessed with knitting these little like stuffed snails. I wish I still had one, but like that, yeah, I just was like really into it. And like that carried on through college. Before dyeing yarn, before being a dyer, I was doing illustration. It wasn't what I wanted to really do with my life. Like I tried doing illustration and it was just like burnout city. Like I couldn't get myself to like draw. It was really hard. I still to this day can't really like draw the way I used to anymore because I monetized my hobby.
Yeah.
But I always really loved fiber arts, and like running this business is like, you know, it is still kind of monetizing my hobby, but my hobby wasn't dyeing, it was knitting, and it still is. And so dyeing is kind of a way to like be involved in this like community in this industry that I really, really love. So that's where I came from.
My grandmother taught me how to crochet when I was around 5 or 6 years old. And she did it to keep me from like popping out of my seat. She was like, I need this child to sit down and just chill out for a little bit. And so she handed me one of her crochet hooks and some yarn, and she taught me how to like do the chain stitch and then a single crochet. And she was like, just keep going, you know, like don't stop. And I was like, she tried to teach me to go back and forth. What I did was I went around and I just kept going around and around. And she was like, huh, that's not quite what I wanted you to do, but that's very innovative. Keep going, you know, like. And eventually she taught me how to do like different stitches and that kind of thing. And it just kind of snowballed. And I stopped after a bit. Then I got married and we moved to Germany we got stationed in Germany. And it's isolating. And I walked by a group of women crocheting and knitting together. And I was like, I can do that. I can sit with those ladies and crochet. So I picked up some crochet hooks and yarn, and like I asked them, I was like, when do you guys come back here? I like stopped, and I'm also very extroverted. So I have no problem being like, hey, I want to come do this with you. Can I do this with you? And they were like, yeah, you can come do this with us, you know? So, I asked them, I was like, how often do you meet here and when? I'll write it in my schedule. You know, I sat down with them and one of them taught me how to knit. And it was kind of like, just went from there. Another snowball, another, you know, hyper focus. And I ended up getting into indie dyed yarn when we went to a local yarn store in like some tiny little town in Germany. Like that's how Germany is set up. Or like Europe. There's no like, there are big cities, but the rest of it is all just like one little village and then like the highway and then another tiny, tiny little village and then the highway, you know. So we drove into this little village and there was a little yarn shop. And I was like, yeah, I want to see what they got. So we walked in and they had some indie dyed yarn. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm, you know, going to buy it. And I bought it and I was so excited. And I was like, you know, what would be cool is yarn dyed that looks like superhero colors. Because my kid at the time, like, he was around 7, 8 years old, and he was like big into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, that was his thing. So we picked colors together, and we started with Kool-Aid, and then eventually I was like, I'm gonna get some acid dyes. And I picked up some like secondhand pots. We ended up doing some, Marvel Cinematic Universe colors. And a friend of mine was like, "Can I buy that one from you?" That, because I really like that one. And I was like, I can make no promises on the quality of this, And she was like, "That's fine." She's like, "But I really like that color." And I was like, "Okay." And she's like, "You should do this professionally." And I was like, "I don't think so." No. But that January, my husband got into a car accident and totaled my car. So we needed to buy a new car. Luckily, no one was hurt. It wasn't that big deal. Okay. But we needed to buy a new car. And I was like, maybe I should sell some yarn to pay for my new car. So I just sold at like local little craft fairs, like, that kind of thing. And I did oddly very well for like just a hobby dyer, and it kind of grew into a bit of a scary thing when I got accepted into Berlin Knits, which is like that, like a really big thing out there. And it's because one of the organizers liked my shtick, like the geek, thing. And she was like, "I'm a geek too. I really like all your comic book colorways." I did terribly. I was not anywhere on the level of those people walking in there. Like, they had Martina Bem there, and like Amy from La Bien Amie. I was nowhere on that level. Nowhere. But it was fun to go.
Yeah.
And see what level these people were on that I needed to get to, And eventually moved back to the States, and that's when I picked up self-striping. And just because that's what I enjoyed knitting with.
Yeah.
And that I found out was what helped my ADHD when I was knitting, is that I had to get to the next stripe. I was like, oh, I'm bored knitting with like solids and tonals and variegateds and that kind of thing. I need something new every, few rows. So I was like, I want to do something like that. I want to do what I like. So I ended up with the self-striping. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
I love it.
I love that. I didn't think about that.
After talking to several people, several dyers, I feel like the theme that I come across more often than not is that they dye what they like, and then people who are like-minded find them. And that's the same with like shops, right? Like when I talked to Jess with La Mercerie and obviously Flock, and then even Catherine at Brooklyn General Store, it was like, how do you choose your yarn to to sell in the shop? And it's I start with what I like, and like-minded people come in. So I like that, because who wants to do stuff that they don't like?
If you should stop.
Yeah,
I tried it at
life's
first
too short.
when I started
if you're
dyeing.
not having fun, then it's not worth it.
Not at all. When I started dyeing, the pivot to dyeing was very much like I think I could do, and I was like completely oblivious to the knitting industry as a whole. Like, I had been knitting in my little bubble, not really paying attention to names or anything like that. So like, I went into this completely blind. I just found indie dyers on Instagram, and I'm like, that's cool. I could do that. It's 2020. I have nothing else to do. I don't want to illustrate. Maybe I could do this, and maybe it could be a business. And so I started. And so at first I started dyeing colors that I think other people would like. And then I realized I didn't want to dye those colors.
Yeah.
Now I do. And my most successful collection was one that I based on like shoujo anime, and it was all very pastel, magical girly, like Sailor Moon, pinky purpley, and it was like my best selling collection.
Oh,
you
it's
could
such a
tell.
good collection too.
What do you feel is a challenge that you've had with running a business, with ADHD, and how have you overcome it?
Finishing tasks.
Big same.
When I have a big task, can I like a fiber festival prep specifically? I over like write down the list of things that I need to do, and I always overdo it every single time. I'm like, oh, I could die up all of this. No, I can't. No, I cannot. And there has to always be a point where I'm like, it's usually about a week out where I'm like, you have to cut this down. There has to be a point where I have to like release control.
It's time to stop.
And be like, nope, this isn't going to get done. This part of the list is not going to get done. What can you get done by the time you have to leave? What needs to get into the car and out, kind of thing. And that's a big thing for me. And I just had to accept that I'm always going to overestimate my ability in that sense. And I'm always going to have that moment where I'm going to cry. And then I'm going to sit down and make decisions and cut out what has to be cut out.
Marcela, I think it's time to talk about the playlist.
The playlist. So yeah, I 100% agree with Amanda that like the like executive functioning part of like getting myself to do the task is like really hard, which the playlists do play into. My big thing with that is time management, because like I have like time blindness. Like I can't really tell how much time certain tasks are going to take. And also when I write down to-do lists, I don't break them down enough. So like literally sometimes I'll have like a project. I try to use Notion. Try is the operative word. I try to use to at least have somewhere that I've written down the things I need to do. So I'll have like a project that's like, like let's say for a flock, it was like flock prep. And literally, like I looked at it about a month or two out and I was like, I need to break this down, because the step was dye yarn, which like it's not helpful. But regardless,
That's like when I make lists before I go on vacation, and it's like, all of the stuff around the house that I'd like to do, and then it's like pack suitcase.
It's like what? Do like what? Please pass me, give me something. But so so I have trouble like chunking out lists, and so sometimes I'll put a task on there that like either takes way longer than that I think is going to take, or it doesn't take that much time. And so that is like really hard for me to like get things done. So I started kind of like timing myself, and this actually started with like my showers. I have a speaker in my bathroom that's like Bluetooth, and so like I started doing this with my showers, and then I'm like, I can do this for work. I always have playlists. I've always made playlists. I am not like an album girly. I can't listen to just one album. It has to be multiple things, and it has to be upbeat. And so I have always made playlists, and every year I make one playlist where I just add songs that I like that year, and then at the end of the year I just title it that year, so then it's like a nice little thing. But so right now I think it has like 130 songs on it or something, and it's just a long playlist, and it's just very eclectic. But I know those songs because that's pretty much almost exclusively what I listen to unless I'm in a different mood. And so I kind of know how long they are. And so what I start doing, because I use Spotify, I queue up like enough songs to equal 20 minutes roughly, or 30 minutes or an hour. And then I take note of what song is the last song. And then I will play the playlist. And it's upbeat, so it gets me going. I read somewhere that like 156 beats per minute or higher is like really good for ADHD. Like it just kind of like makes you want to get up and go. I do have a playlist. I can send it to Jen that I made and disclaimer, it is my music taste. It's a lot of K-pop. It's a lot of
sounds great.
I love it.
It's perfect. Great. It's great, but it's very upbeat. I also put a lot of like old millennial music on, like Panic at the Disco and stuff like that. But it, all of my playlists are at least that upbeat, and so it gets me to like do the task and like keep myself moving, and then like I'll hear the song that's like my cue, and then I'm like, oh, okay, time to stop this, or like time to take a break or whatever. Because the other thing that happens is if I'm doing something that requires deep focus, I will just hyper focus and like not stop that task until I'm like, wow, I really have to pee or something, you know?
Yeah.
And I found out recently my sister also does this with her showers of like, she's like, oh yeah, no, I'll queue up songs. I'll be like, when this plays, I have to get out. Like, so I do the same thing, and I've always done it, and it's just really helpful.
That's awesome.
Sneaky little timer hack.
That's a really good one. I feel like there's a couple of things that people said that kind of had to do with timers when we were talking at Flock. So if you have any like hacks for not only just business, but life and neurodivergence, like throw them in the comments. I want to see what everyone is doing, because I feel like we can all learn from each other, and not everything is going to work for everyone else, but there could be an aha moment that happens for somebody. So,
and there's so many good ones, and I've stolen a lot from other people that have been like, oh, I do this, and I'm like, that's smart.
I recently downloaded that app. What is it called? Goblin Tools.
Oh,
Insane. It's so good.
It like chunks things out for you, and like,
yeah, it's you can type in pack my suitcase, and it'll break down everything you need to do.
oh my God.
I feel like that's like the correct use of AI, honestly. Like,
Exactly.
Oh my God. Okay.
Like,
what is it called again?
Goblin Tools.
Goblin Tools. That's that's going to be downloaded next.
Yeah.
And then we'll see if I forget about it after that. But you know, who knows?
Or if you like have an email from someone and you can't tell if that person is mad at you or not in that email, you can cut and paste that email into the app, and it'll tell you if that person is mad at you.
It'll like try to like decipher tone of like, oh, this is just like they're asking this, or like it'll rephrase it, because sometimes, I don't know about you guys, like I get stuck on like a phrasing or like a way someone said something via text or in person, and be like, oh my God, they hate me.
Yeah,
they hate me. But then it's like, no,
they're just asking you a question.
And that's why like when I type, anybody's like signed up for my newsletter or like I've like communicated with at any point, I use a lot of exclamation points and like the colon parentheses smiley face, because it's like, I'm happy, I am excited to message you back.
Yeah, I always have to tone that down.
Oh yeah, no, and oh my gosh, so much having to do with this. Like, when I found out about RSD, I was like, God, like that was another huge aha moment. Like, for holy ADHD. Cow, this is like, I'm not just like overly sensitive for no reason,
because I didn't get invited to a party, or like I did, like,
or somebody used a period instead of an exclamation point when they sent me a text. Like, I'm like, or somebody wasn't texting at a normal pace that they would be texting, and it's like, no, they're probably busy, they're not mad at you,
they're not texting you back. Someone told somebody a piece of news to someone else before you, and then it's like,
oh God. And then like, you, why do you hate me? Like, yeah,
but it's also like, I'm bad at texting people. Like, I have so many unread text messages right now. I'm sorry, everyone. I usually will get back to everyone like in bulk. The guilt just becomes too much. And then I'm just like, okay, now everyone's responded to, and they'll have to wait another 2 days for a response if they send something else.
I like immediately.
Same with DMs on Instagram. I'm just like, I have so many right now. I think I have like 20 that I need to get back to. And it's been like the last 2 days. And
Instagram DMs are harder for me. Oh, they're just like,
I chronically will answer them, but won't hit send.
Oh,
so they're just like sitting there, and I'm like, what? Why haven't they gotten back to me yet? And I get upset, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute.
I'm like,
the message thing to be like, why are you mad at me? And I'm like, that's why I haven't responded to me.
I'm the queen of typing out a text message and not hitting send.
Mm-hmm.
Or an email too. Like that's 100%.
I like him too perfectionist and people pleasing about like, did I do it right? Did it send? I'll go to the sent mess. I'm like, I just want to make sure that it like.
I mean, I've done that before too, for sure.
I just want to make, or like I'll on the text bubble, I'll like, swipe till you could see the timestamp on it.
The timestamp?
Did
I
this
do that
send?
all the time.
Did I send it in like a timely manner?
So if you're an overly sensitive neurodivergent person, that's okay. We're here for you.
Mm-hmm.
You can
Nobody hates you.
No one hates you. The thing that I really leaned into, as somebody who has worked for, startups and in tech and for agencies and in-house just at companies, it's always this is how I should be as a professional in the workplace that really got me. So like, I don't know, I think the example that always comes up for me is like, reading that to be a successful entrepreneur, this person wakes up at 5 a.m. every day and meditates. And I'm like, okay, well, so far with this list of things that this person does, it's like, I can't do either of those. It's really just embracing who you are as a person and being like, okay, I'm never going to be an early riser. And even like booking flights and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, we're going later in the day because I know who I am. But just like embracing who you are with your neurodivergence, I think has really helped me looking back and being like, okay, well, I wasn't a bad person because I was usually about 10 minutes late. And I wasn't a bad person because I, didn't start my morning with 15 minutes of meditation to clear my mind. Not everyone is going to be a 9 to 5,
No.
like bang everything out and then go home. Society has been conditioned to this is how it is supposed to be. And, I know that there are people who work jobs at night and all of that. So I'm not saying that everybody is a 9 to 5, but I think that seeing more companies embrace this idea of as long as you're getting your shit done, great, is really refreshing, I think, especially with people who are neurodivergent. So if you are one of those companies, or if you are a leader at a company and you embrace that, I think that's like standing ovation. Like more people should be doing that. It's great.
I agree. My husband works traditional 9 to 5 job. It's remote though, so he does get that flexibility of like, he doesn't have to like be clocked in. But it's really interesting because like since I work for myself and I've had jobs here and there, but like I've only really worked for myself and like always been in like the art scene. I never had like, Jen, what you were describing of like seeing everybody else around you be like normal, like neurotypical. I hesitate to use the word like normal because what even is normal? But like,
yeah, for anyone that's listening, we've been air quotes is around normal.
But it's so like just like feeling like society is like putting you in a box or being like you're supposed to be a certain way because that's like what we have, the ideal person who works at X company, looks like
neurotypical people have
just
like
neurotypical
how this all works.
If you've been like in the art scene, like the individualism is really like embraced in those communities of like, be your own person, you have to freelance. So you kind of are your own boss in a way, like you kind of set your own projects and schedules. And like, I kind of am really glad that I never went into the corporate sphere because, while I love the structure and I do miss that's hard for me. My most productive hours are like from 10 a.m. to noon, and then again from like 4 to 6. And in between there, like I may get work done, I may not. Like it's really nice to not have to like report to someone because like
embrace who you are because you are lovely. I'm really proud of us. We didn't take very many side quests. I feel like this was
we did a great job.
Wow, we did a really great job. Very
Big
proud
it
of
out.
us.
This is like the third time we all talk about ADHD together.
Yeah.
Which probably helps.
Thank you both so much for taking the time.
Thank you for, having us on. This is kind of like my Roman Empire, so I was all excited to talk about it again.
Thank you again. Yay.
Yay!
Okay, I'm going to